Hey guys, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts, and welcome to my craft room. This is my WiP It Wednesday video where I basically show you everything I've been working on this week, even if it's only one little row of knitting, just to give you an idea of how I spend my week in the craft room. Now, because you know I like to talk with my hands a lot, I just like to explain. I do have this big old scratch. My daughter was pestering one of the cats when she came to visit and I didn't realize it, and when I went to pick her up, yes, it was Miss Whiskers that was in my Talk to Me Tuesday video, and she kind of scratched me. I'm sorry if it bothers anyone, but it's way too big to be putting a band-aid on. So let's move on. If you've been watching me throughout the week, you've already seen my placemats. I'm not going to go into big detail with these because there are videos that show and talk all about them. I do really like this blue flower fabric though. I don't normally buy flower fabric, but this was a fat quarter and I just thought, because it's so subtle, I just had to pick it up. I showed my finished hand embroideries on my Talk to Me Tuesday yesterday. This is from Namaste Embroidery. This was one of her free patterns. It came printed out on a sheet like this, so since they were both on the same sheet, even though the designs are basically the same, I decided I'm going to stitch them anyways. This is her original pattern, and then she decided to do an upgraded version, and she changed the stitches around. So Jessica over at Namaste Embroidery, she has, don't know if this might be their only free pattern, but she has some very lovely patterns. You can also find her on Instagram. I actually did this one first, if you remember, and I went through and I tried some different stitches. I've never done a brick or fill-in stitch, so that's what I used here. This is the basic satin stitch, and I think it came out pretty well. It's padded. I put a little bit of stitches underneath to keep it up. And then this is like a reverse chain stitch with some, instead of French knots, I like to do, I believe they're colonial knots. They have a way to, you do this little twist with it, and the knots tend to stay a lot tighter. French knots for me tend to get a little wobbly. And this is the split stitch. More satin stitch. I just did it a half and half to make these leaves kind of look a little bit, get a little more character to them. Stem stitch. Jessica calls this a, I don't know what it is. I just made it up and I'm going to call it a leaf stitch. Basically, you just have two little stitches on the side and one stitch down the center. These are some type of a chain stitch that's a non-attached chain stitch. You have a wagon wheel rose. Now, this is very, very unpopular with the embroidery crowd, but I mean, while it looks nice and everything, I'm not sure. It kind of feels, I don't know, not quite, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's just kind of big and bulky when everything else is so nice and low to the fabric. Maybe that's what bothers me so much. And these are just elongated, detached chain stitches. So I went ahead and I played with this a little bit. And then I went back and I made the original one. I did the wagon rose, whatever it's called. See, this is so great because I just kind of do the stitches. Like Jessica says, she just does them and does them however she thinks is going to work for her project and makes them up as she goes along. And that's why I like watching her videos, because I kind of craft the same way. So I went with the two-tone purple. I did the individual dark purple first, and then I switched over to a lighter purple. Where with this rose, I used a variegated embroidery floss, and it did all the color changing for me. I think this is one of those stars you always see like over Jesus's crib at Christmas, where you have the cross and then it has an X on top. I'm not really sure what that star is called, but I did one of those up there. There was just a single dot in the pattern for like a French knot or something, but I already had some over here and everything, so I decided to just put a little star up there. Once again, I did the reverse chain or daisy stitch, split stitch all the way around. I did the elongated detached chain stitch, but then I noticed because it was so long, these threads were kind of loose and I didn't really like that, so I just went ahead and couched them all down in a lighter color blue, and it kind of leaves it a little speckly there. And I thought instead of having all that dark blue there, this light blue just added a little bit extra color to it and depth. I went to my old standby with the back stitch here because I'd already done so many I couldn't think of what other type of stitch to do there, so I went a back stitch. And all these little leaves, okay, a vine is orange and the leaves are blue. In my world, that works, especially when you have a two-tone purple flower. So I went with satin stitch there. Now these are designed to be in the embroidery hoop. You're supposed to pull all this back and you put glue on it and then you can just hang it on your wall. But I think I'm going to combine my embroidery with my quilting and make a wall hanging. Sticking with the embroidery theme, I worked on my Hocus Pocusville from Crabapple Hill Studios, I believe is their actual name. I think last time you saw it, I added all of these little lines in this whole centerpiece here. I only worked on this one a little bit this week. But it's coming along really nicely, and I'm getting used to stitching through this wash away stabilizer. If you've ever embroidered, you know that sound when you put your needle through and it goes thump, like going through a drum? This really enhances it, so I'm kind of actually enjoying hearing and feeling the needle go through it. And like I said before in a previous video, having a stabilizer on here, normally I put it on the back, so it's been kind of different having it on the front. And I kind of like it, but next time I will definitely use a different color ink so I can actually see it easier when the overhead light in the craft room is shining on it. When it came to knitting, as I've said yesterday, I'm not sure if I've showed you the finished part of this hat, but I have this hat done and I have this hat started. These are both the Bankhead hat and it's a free pattern on Ravelry. If you go down into the description bar down below this video, you click on that little arrow triangle thing. My Ravelry page is listed there, and I'm trying to keep all my project up to date, and I know that I have this one listed. I haven't put this one on yet because it's the same design, but you'll be able to find the link to the free pattern. Both of them were made with the Bernat Mosaic. This one happens to be Vivid. I don't remember this color for the rainbow. I'll have to look that one up when I put it in into the Ravelry page. I am just past the brim. I think I've gone maybe 2, maybe 3 rows. So I really like this pattern, especially for the guys, because instead of just knitting round and round and round, you have a little bit extra because you have this slight ribbing. It's basically, you're going to do 4 knit stitches and a purl. If you're a knitter, you'll understand that. And it adds just a little bit of stretch, and when you wear it, it opens it up, and you can see these little purls. So as a knit stitch, you can see that these are all flat. But as a purl stitch, they have these little bumps that come up. So that works out really nice. I do the twisted rib for most of my hats. It's where you knit one through the back of the loop and then you purl the next stitch. Normally you would just knit it, but what it ends up doing is, I like the way it has a little bit of a tighter brim to it, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a slant because the stitches are twisted and they're not supposed to be. So this is going to be the same hat, and once again these are going to be going to the Hats for Vets from the Big Family Homestead. Their daughter Claire is collecting them. And I store these in my little froggy bag that I make. This is one of the snap bags. I really like this for hats. It's a good size. Sticking with the knitting, normally you see me finish one dishcloth. This one is still the same. I haven't touched this in several days, I don't think. This is grandmother's favorite dishcloth. You start with just a few stitches here and you knit it on a diagonal until you get to the point where you like. And for me, that's 40 stitches. And then I start decreasing down. I've had several requests for filming a video on how to actually knit these. So for those who are interested, you can go ahead and look forward to this in an upcoming video. And for those of you that don't knit, don't worry. I'm still going to have plenty of other videos to keep everyone's interest. Because as you guys already know, I knit, I embroider, I do hand stitching, I do a lot of crafts, so there's always going to be something for someone. In another one of my snap bags, my turtle bag, I have my son Robbie's socks. I like to make his socks out of the Patton's Croy yarn for socks. Mostly, well, 2 reasons. One, it's a little bit less expensive than, like, say, the hand-dyed yarns. The hand-dyed yarns are gorgeous, but my son just throws his socks in the washer and dryer, and he wears them out on the cement driveway and on the rock roads, and he likes to wear them to bonfires with his little slides. You know, those shoes that they just slide into. They're not flip-flops or sandals, whatever. I never really quite understood those, but he likes them. The only problem I'm having with this one is this is 50 grams. And normally you take 100 grams to do socks, so you buy 2 balls, of which I did. But this happens to be a little thicker of a wool, so instead of the normal 425 yards that you might get, these only have 166 yards each. So that puts me only at 3 something, and it's not quite enough to knit his socks. So I'm going to have to order another skein just to finish off his socks, because when I knit his socks, he prefers, how many times can I say the word socks? He likes the part of the leg of the sock to go up high. He doesn't like these little short socks, which is kind of funny because when he wears socks with his shoes, he tends to wear the no-shows or the really low ones. But when you take a hand knit sock and you fold it in half at the heel, he likes it to where the length of his foot is equal to the length of his leg. So I only have this much yarn left, and I still have to go all the way up to here before I start to do the ribbing. Now normally if it was for me, I would either make short socks or I would just grab a different yarn and finish it off. But through trial and error, I have learned that my son Robbie George likes his socks all of the same yarn. He doesn't like different colored toes or different cuffs or heels. It does make it a little easier for me because I don't have to weave in, I only weave in 2 ends like this. With all the different socks, every time you switch yarn, you have 2 extra ends to weave in. So as you can see, I've gotten pretty far up past, I've gotten 20 plus rows. I think I stopped at 25 because I wanted to go ahead and start working on this sock. This one is just past the heel, and I'll start working on this one tomorrow. As you can see, just for 25 rows, this ball is a lot smaller than that one. And sometimes you have to weigh the yarns before you use them if it's something that really matters and it has to be exact. I put all of these stitch markers in his socks so I know that they're all the same size, that both of them are going to fit his feet the same. But a lot of times you're going to have a little extra yarn in one skein than the other, and I think that's what's going to happen here. But I'll go ahead and order another skein online. And like I said, I'll be able to finish his socks off, and I'll make a pair of shorty socks for myself, which is kind of good because I'm very jealous of these socks and I would like some for myself. Oh, and for those knitters that are following, I go ahead, my favorite needles are the red cabled, the Chow Goose. I knit my socks on a size 1 needle, and for Robbie's socks, he needs his to be 76 stitches because he wears a size 14. So if you're a sock knitter and I tell you that I knit his from the toe to his cuff, from his toe to his heel, that I do 80 rounds, you'll realize that he's got a really big foot. Robbie is currently 6'5", we believe. I think that's the last thing he told me, and at age 19 he seems to still be growing. Now I did work a little bit on one more knitting project. This is the one I actually worked on instead of the dishcloths. This is the Dishcloth Blanket. It is knit just the same as Grandma's favorite dishcloth. You start with a couple stitches and you increase. What I'm doing, I have 2 skeins of this big old yarn. It's a blanket yarn. And when I get to the end of it, I'm using the Bernat blanket. This is colored mallard wood because it's blue and brown. And when I get to the end of the first skein, I'm just going to head switch and start doing decreases to the second skein. And I only got a couple rows done. But as I said, I was going to show you, even if I only worked very little, as long as I got at least 1 row done, I would bring the project over and show it to you. That's it for the knitting. I did want to talk a little bit about the embroidery before I move on to my final project. This is my basic embroidery setup. This is a peekaboo bag that I made to tuck my normal, when I do embroidery in the hoop. I'm actually using this one for my Halloween embroidery. My whole container of supplies for this one is some white embroidery floss. I keep a piece of fabric where I stick the needle in here because I do not leave it on the needle minder when I'm not actually doing the hand embroidery, because It's really easy to lose a needle, and I don't want to step on it, and I don't want my cats to steal it. And then I carry a pair of scissors. These are actually a pair of scissors that I got from the emergency room at the hospital. Every time my husband, which apparently was numerous because I have several of these scissors, anytime he got hurt, then they did stitches, they actually throw these scissors away, so I go ahead and pick them up. I also worked in housekeeping at the hospital for a while, so I could actually pick up a few extras while I was there. They're really good to keep in a project bag because they're so small. This is my regular embroidery setup. I have two of these right now. One of them I have the DMC floss, which is a name brand of the floss. This, when I'm just doing regular embroidery like those hearts, I don't really care if it's a name brand. This is from Michaels. I have a bunch of this. It's called an Iris brand that I just go ahead and bobbin up. And for a while I was putting the numbers on them. But a lot of times I just go ahead and wind it up and I can tell a purple's a purple. I'm mostly looking for, I want to add a red. Which red do I want? I don't need to specifically know a number like you do when you're doing cross stitch. So I have some extra bobbins in there, and I keep all my thread. I have some cardboard bobbins, but I do prefer these plastic ones. These were given to me by a friend. Thank you very much. I use these also. What I was using previously is just these plain white ones, but it's really nice to have these. These almost look like they glow in the dark. I haven't tested that out yet. So this is where I keep that, and it's quite organized and nice and neat and everything, don't you think? Well, this is the old way that I used to store my embroidery floss. This is one of those plastic shoe boxes, and you just got a little peek of what's going to be inside. And now this is where I was storing my embroidery floss. Yeah, it definitely needed a little help because once you start using your thread, it does get a little crazy. I've actually thrown away a lot because once it starts getting like this and it gets all tangled with each other, it's too hard to try to take this apart. So as you can see, I would have the skein, and then anything extra I left over, I would just do one of those little overhand loop knots on here and keep it in there. And a lot of people prefer to put them in plastic Ziploc bags, little sandwich baggies and stuff. But obviously this is not going to be the greatest way to do it because you're constantly digging through looking for a color you want. But that's why I'm switching them over all to the bobbins. But at least, you know, this, I have a lot of colors. So whenever I'm feeling creative, I can just grab these bins out, pick out whatever colors that I want, and then off I go. The other thing that's part of my embroidery and hand stitching kit is Altoids. Because I can't have bad breath when I'm doing stitching, right? No. Once again, yeah, I know, dry sense of humor, Robin, but this is what I have in here. I have beeswax in here. I actually have this little needle threader, and I'm determined to actually make this work. This works fine with sewing thread, but I can't get it to work with, because it's too thin. Let's see, can you see the little wire on there? It's too thin of a wire for the embroidery floss, but I keep it for just actual sewing. Oh, look, I got more. I was wondering where they were. In here is a brick of beeswax. As you can see, it actually says beeswax, and it would have said beeswax, but this is the piece I cut off. And I thought, because when you're handling it, any type of oils on your hand, or sometimes your embroidery floss the dye will come off and bleed a little bit. I wanted to keep the majority of it clean and not have to worry about it, so I decided to just cut off a little piece. It was actually a little bit harder than I expected. And you can see this is some of the flosses. It left a little bit of color on here. So I have to be careful if I decide that I need to wash any of my projects because it looks like they bleed a little, or maybe they're just transference on the beeswax. I don't know. This is my first time using beeswax this year. I've never used it before. So I just store this little piece in this tin. I only do the embroidery projects and stuff at home, so I can just keep this in my drawer and I pull it out as I need it. And I thought, you know, the little can, it's not airtight, but it will help keep a little bit of the air out. Okay, now here's the last project I have to show you. Anyone who's been here for a little while, you have seen my button project where I had the big oval hoop and I was sewing a variety of buttons down onto it in kind of a color wheel sense. Well, I haven't showed this side of me yet to you guys, but one of my little quirks is I can almost completely finish, if not completely finish a project, decide I don't like the way it's looking, and totally tear it out. Like I can knit an entire sweater, look at it and decide, nope, I don't like it, tear the whole thing out and knit it all over again. It doesn't bother me because I really like the process of making things. So I had dozens of buttons on this big hoop. I was enjoying the process, and some of my wonderful subscribers, they wanted to help me out, so they sent me some buttons, and I loved it. They sent me some wonderful buttons that I didn't have, but the problem is on my big hoop, I'd already used up all my buttons, so I'd started using some of the smaller buttons. And then you wonderful people sent me a lot of buttons, and a lot of them were big and medium. So if I were to put them onto the hoop, it would hide all of my favorite buttons. And I had a lot of these little novelty ones that I was trying to strategically place, and they would have gotten covered up. So I cut all the buttons off. You could think I'm crazy. And I started a whole new button project. Now, there's a lot of yellow thread on here, and this looks like a mess. But if you can follow the design, what I decided to do, I was going to make these waves that come like this. And it then just keeps these, in between these two hourglass looking things, I'm going to put all the buttons. And I'm still going to do, instead of like an actual color wheel, I went more with the rainbow. I'm not going to be using like brown buttons and stuff like that because I really like the rainbow colors and I don't want too much autumnal type stuff. So I've started to just stitch some buttons down. See, like this giant button? I mean, it's a huge button. And if I had put this down on top of my project, they would have my buttons would have disappeared. And I wanted to make sure I could really see these buttons. So I went ahead and I started putting down all the really large buttons. And then as time goes by, I will go ahead and start adding more of the smaller buttons to fill in the space. And my earlier project had this type of fabric, and I was planning on covering it completely with the buttons, but no matter what, this was starting to peek through still, and I really didn't like this look against all the colors of the buttons. So I went with some black fabric. And I went with, as you can see, it goes from here to here. So I went with not a very wide strip. This is... oh, it looks to be about 17 inches. It mostly covers my mat. And it's very long. It is probably about 48 inches-ish. So then I decided, like I said, I wanted to go with this pattern that goes in and out. And that I'm going to put starting with the large buttons. And this gives me plenty of room if I have to add some more. And I'm not going to start filling in the small buttons and the novelty ones that I really like little birds and little houses, until I know that I've gotten all my large buttons down and I like the way it's looking. But then I thought, I have these spaces right here because this is going to be the border, and I'm going to have these spaces here. So then I thought what would be really cool is to do the sashiko embroidery. And basically they use it a lot in Japan to like fix holes in jeans and to decorate clothes, and it's more of a mending stitch. So there's a lot of straight lines and pluses and stuff. And I thought I'd fill in these spaces here with some really deep sashiko and have this compressed and then have all the buttons come up. So there'll be a variety of places where I can practice the embroidery stitches and still have my buttons and beads up here. And it's the same thing here. Now I tried to make them so that they're identical, but it was kind of hard. I tried to lay out a pattern and use different paper and get everything perfect. But since I was basically doing freeform shapes, I just decided, ooh, I'm going to let it be as it is. And however it comes out, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm a wonky crafter. I don't require everything to be identical and perfect. So this is what I'm going to be doing. This is a little bit harder because you can't really put an embroidery hoop on this, so you have to stitch it loose in your hand. I was previously letting all the threads go like this, but this part I put in an embroidery hoop, but then as I kept going on, I wasn't able to do it. I think I'm going to have to stitch each one down individually, like I did here. Once this is all done, I'm going to put a different backing fabric on it so that the back of the quilt is nice and clean. And then I'll be able to hang this in my craft room. So there you go. I think that is everything I've worked on this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this longer extended version. If you need links to any of the designs that I haven't put up in the iCard or down below, please go ahead and leave me a comment. If this is a style of video you like to see on the WiP It Wednesday, where I just babble on and talk more in depth about the projects I'm working on, please go ahead and like the video and subscribe and come back next Wednesday. Bye!